All right, good morning. My name's Marla. I'll be facilitating the meeting today. First, I will read our slogan and then some of the rules and so forth. Eracism is the slogan of the group Erace, which was formed in New Orleans in the summer of 1993. We seek ways through person-to-person communication to show that we are committed to treating, excuse me, all human beings with love, respect, empathy, compassion, and humility. Join us. Erase is an organization that does not espouse any political party, and we have no religious affiliation. We believe in acceptance of all people, and no personal attacks of any kind will be tolerated. We come with the intention to listen, learn, and not to argue. All right, the land acknowledgement. We begin today by acknowledging that what we know as the United States is the ancestral and unceded territory of many indigenous peoples, and that there are many more nations and tribes that could be named here. Members of our group today are on the land of the Chitimacha and Choctaw in New Orleans, the Creeks and Cherokees in Atlanta, the Tonkawan, Lipan, Apache, and Comanche in Austin, excuse me, the Lenape and Piscataway in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples in Boston, the Cahuilla and Mojave in Riverside, and the Lumbee in Fayetteville. We thank their ancestors for being stewards of these lands through the generations and through today. We need to protect and honor the history and people of these places. Despite centuries of colonial theft and violence, we should always remember that we are still on Indigenous land and it will always be Indigenous land. All right. I'll explain the format. I think most everybody probably knows, but just a quick review. Everybody should please keep yourselves on mute unless you're talking. I'll be keeping a list of people who would like to speak. And if you want to be on that list, just raise one finger to indicate that you would like to be on the list to speak. Each person who wants to speak will have 2 minutes. Please respect and don't interrupt the speaker. No side comments, personal attacks, or name calling. Explain through clarification questions. If after a speaker has spoken and you have a question about what they said, you may raise 2 fingers to ask a clarifying question. A clarifying question would be, I didn't understand what you meant by a specific word or term, or could you clarify what you meant by XYZ? These questions are not meant to further the opinion of the asker. They should not, yeah, I don't know what the birds are. Teresa mentioned that. I'm like, where is that coming from? Anyway, clarify what you meant by that specific thing. They're not meant to be a long monologue and so forth. Only 2 people may ask a clarifying question per speaker. Okay, reasons why I brought the topic. I actually selected this article quite a while ago, like maybe a week or so ago, before everything transpired on New Year's Eve here in New Orleans. So it does seem to be a fitting topic given all of the recent events and given the differences between the 2 people who are, the suspects, if you will. So I just thought it would be an interesting discussion. Okay, I will go around and ask you all to please introduce yourselves if you feel so inclined, and then we'll get started. I'll just go by the order I see you on my screen. Phyllis, you're first.
Morning, I'm Phyllis. I'm in New Orleans and I've been coming to Erase since 2009. 2008.
Nancy.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody had a nice holiday. It's good to see you all again. I'm in New Orleans, and I'm Nancy, and I have been coming to Erase since June of 2007.
Thank you. Beatrice.
Hi, good morning. Beatrice in East Point, right outside of Atlanta, coming to Erase since about 1994 when I was still in New Orleans. Good morning. Happy New Year to everyone.
Richard.
Good morning, Richard in New Orleans also, and happy to see everybody again. and I've been with Erace since about 93 at the beginning.
Thank you. Dee Dee, good to see you too.
Hi, I'm Dee Dee, and I'm in California. I'm sitting here freezing to death. I just turned the heat on in the house because it's 40 something degrees outside, which is probably nothing for you guys, but it's cold for us. Okay. I've been coming to Erase since the pandemic. This meeting is one of the few good things that came out of the pandemic. And so I'm here, happy to be here. I got up, woke up naturally at 6:45. I said, "Oh, I have a race," and so I got up. And so there's a time difference here, but it's no big deal. Anyway, welcome. Good to see all your faces, and I really like this meeting.
Thank you. Louise.
I'm Louise. I've been coming to Erace meetings since the mid-90s in New Orleans, and then after Katrina, I moved here to Austin, Texas.
Thank you. Marion. I think you're muted.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good to see everybody in the new year. I've been coming to, excuse me, coming to Erase meetings since 93. Harvey and I call him Harvey because when I met Richard, he was Harvey. So Harvey don't get mad at me. Richard don't get mad at me. So Richard and I were in the same, it came about the same time, I think, 93. So that's June of 1993 when I went to the very first Erase meeting at the library.
You. Reverend Larry.
Good morning, I'm Larry, and I've been coming to Erace since about 1995. And speaking of library, I remember the days when we were meeting at the library and we'd be so large that we'd have to break off into smaller groups. But Happy New Year to everybody.
Teresa.
All right, Happy New Year, everyone. Dee Dee, I love that dramatic lighting you got going on. It's very 90s music video, so thumbs up on that. I am zooming in from Fayetteville, North Carolina. I've been coming since August 2022.
Thank you. And Glenn.
Happy New Year to everyone. My name is Glenn Abdullah. I've been coming to Erase since 1994. Looking forward to today's meeting.
Thank you. And since my alarm is not, you can't hear my alarm when I ring it from here, Louise has so kindly offered to time folks. With that, we will get started. And who would like to be on the list to speak?
Me and the birds are looking after it after the timing.
Thank you. I thought the birds were at my house. So confused. Okay, Teresa? Anybody else right now? All right, Beatrice. Okay. Teresa, whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. I'm eating, that's why I have my camera off. Of course, you'd start with me. But Marla, thank you for choosing this article. I love anything that confirms my bias, namely that white men, regardless of any, and he's actually rich, so that they get the cushiest legal interpretation, nuanced, and wow, he's a hero too to some people is just absolutely amazing. Well, I forget what I was watching. I know it was some late night comedian. It's just like, can you imagine if Luigi was ugly? Would he get all of this attention and blah, 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 and whatever? But, you know, I said, I write out, and they're no longer Christmas cards anymore, and they're no longer holiday cards. They're just end of the year cards. And I just kept saying in all of them that, you know, we're about to get a slew of Batman villains, and that is just apropos. Nothing has changed my mind. I'm living in that universe now. I recently started watching the series Gotham, it was in 2014 when that series first started, and it's part of the Batman universe. And one of the crime bosses said that organized crime cannot exist without law and order. And so now I'm wondering, and that was what a great quote. I'm just going to keep that in mind this entire 4 years, how organized crime cannot exist without law and order. And so if this person who committed first degree murder is not convicted as such, because he planned it out, he targeted it. It was like absolutely. So I'm wondering what's gonna what's gonna play out. Is organized crime going to insist that the law be followed, because you just can't have everyone committing premeditated murder because they don't like something? And so I'm really interested to see which set of privileges or thought is going to actually win out. Thank you.
Beatrice.
Yeah, Teresa, I agree with everything that Teresa said. I will not be able to say it as profoundly, but I am so concerned, not just with the sympathy that this person has received, the money that this person has received, identifying and saying he did, yes, he did this, but there's no but. He committed an act of premeditated murder, and to try to have people have sympathy for him is very concerning to me, especially as an educator. I look at what children learn in so many ways from so much. I used to teach my students conflict resolution skills, and I would help them know that if someone does something to you, then I help them learn how to use I statements. I feel this and this and this because, expressing what has happened to them and how you feel about it. And I wish that you would just really teaching them. And so I remember one time somebody who had a difference with the car dealership drove their car into the dealership and broke the windows and didn't kill anybody. But I asked my students, I said, do you think this is a good way to solve a problem? So this person, this alleged murderer, had a problem with the insurance industry. Is that a good way to solve your problem? No matter what you had done to try to solve it. And I know that profit motive is just eats up our whole health system, really. I heard a wonderful presentation about the healthcare in Portugal. People live 5 years longer, the life expectancy, because of the way the healthcare situation works there. But that's not a solution to a problem. But we sympathize and people identify with this man and raise money for this person who has committed this act of violence. So I think this article is spot on. And we just need to always be aware that the African American perpetrator of anything is not going to receive the same kind of consideration. Nobody's going to look at your background and all. Nobody's going to have any sense of what may have caused. The article is spot on.
All right, thank you. The list is open.
I think Glenn, didn't
Oh,
Glenn just raise his hand?
did he?
I sure did.
Okay, Glenn, you're next, and then Richard.
I think we got it all wrong. It's not that people love him. They hate the medical establishment. I didn't know how bad it was, how bad it had got. I thought that with the new rules they put on them, that they had stopped kicking people off the insurance. I've just had an experience where they kicked my brother, didn't give him all what he was supposed to get in medical treatment. Thanks to Phyllis, she helped me to get him reestablished again with her knowledge that she has. But it is the hatred of the medical system. There's a lot of people have been mistreated by the medical system. That's what the rage is all about. It's not him killing this man. He's a symbol of that greed. And that's what they're mad at. I'll talk to you later. That's it.
Thank you. Richard.
Yes, I do agree largely with what what Glenn just said, and I do want to talk about a little bit what you, Beatrice, said about that nobody ever really looks objectively into the background of, I believe you said African Americans, but I'd like to specifically cite what I just read about concerning Jabbar, the suspect in the Bourbon Street killings, and because just to preface this, I have a lot of respect for The Guardian. It's one of my go-to sources for good reporting, but I think on this one, they've largely got it wrong. Particularly if you look at the outcome of European American mass murderers. Historically, yes, there may have been a leniency given, but I think in the 21st century, I think it's fair to say that it's not the color of the skin that determines the outcome of the sentence. It's being convicted and found guilty that's going to determine the outcome of the sentence. And with respect to, again, that the background is not looked into, here's what NBC, which by any stretch of imagination is a mainstream platform, said about Jabbar. He was a good student and a model soldier with a quiet disposition. But over a few years, that life began to deteriorate, and it goes on in that vein. So I think, again, historically, what this article raises may be true, but I think largely in the 21st century, it's overstated. Thank you.
Beatrice, and then the list is open.
I just wanted to say that there is an element of sympathy. I also have read a lot about Jabbar, and I agree with what you're saying, Richard. There's an element, there is an appearance as an element and undergirding something of sympathy with persons who are not persons of color who commit crimes. I'm not saying there is not any background information, but it seems to me that there's something that lends an element of humanity, sympathy, something for European American non-people of color when they are in positions of crime, of having committed a crime. I'm thinking about Dylan Roof and this is a completely different situation. Of course, Dylan Roof was being taken to get a hamburger before he was arrested when he killed all the people in Mother Emanuel. I mean, I understand that there has been very good background information on Jabbar. As a matter of fact, Marion says she taught some Jabbars at Crossman, which is, that's kind of concerning. But there's just a difference, I think, overall, even now, in the way people who are white, European Americans, who have committed heinous crimes, there's something different about the way they are portrayed. And I think it's sympathetic. Maybe lack of background information was not the correct way to express it, but I think the article is spot on in that sense, once again, as I've said.
Thank you, Teresa, and then the list is open.
One thing I liked about the article is that it also mentioned the school shooting in Columbine. I was teaching in Denver, Colorado at that time, and 8th grade math. And if you know anything about middle schoolers, their brains are just all over the place along with their hormones. But that incident, I thought at the time, the silver lining for me was that it motivated many of my 8th graders to watch the news and read the newspaper. I mean, who as an 8th grader, 13-year-old was doing that? And one thing that they picked up on and they asked me about is, Miss, why do they keep saying that they expected one of us? Because I taught at MLK, it was MLK Middle School when I taught there, and now it's MLK Efficacy. I can't even say the word right now. Academy. Efficacy. There we go. Academy. And my 13-year-olds with their scattered brains and hormones picked up on the bias. You know how blatant you have to be when you get these news reports, very, very sympathetic. And these were 2 white kids who killed white kids. about what it went wrong in our society, that these two were, you would expect that at an urban school, which is where my students went. I mean, they weren't all Black. I did have a handful of white kids, but I mean, it was mostly minority students. And even they picked up on the explicit bias and racism. And I told them, I said, well, according to the media, they expect somebody with your background, you guys, at this type of school setting, to have done something like that. And as the school counselor said, and I absolutely love Dr. Blattner, but she said, our kids aren't going to plan anything. They believe in drive-bys. Like if they can't do it in the moment while they're angry, they're not going to plan it. So that's really stupid to think that children of color are just going to be the most violent. Whereas I always think it's interesting that society, or the dominant narrative, I should say, never thinks that the people with the most resources aren't going to be violent, that they're not going to put those resources to bad means.
Thank you. Larry, and then we have Glenn.
The article stated that many have turned Mangione into a martyr. I think there are a lot of people who may feel like Mangione, who may feel like Jabbar, who may feel like anybody who go off the deep age, but they don't have the nerves to do what they did. But it's not that they're not feeling the same frustration. If you've got a child who needs a heart operation and can't get it because they don't have no insurance. Some of you might recall the movie Denzel Washington played in 2002 called John Q. Well, John Q just took over the whole hospital in order that his child, who didn't have the proper insurance, could get some kind of a heart operation. And in the end, when John Q finally got everything done, he was applauded by all those who were outside the hospital, because there were many who were feeling the same way that John Q felt. You could go back into history, and there were many slaves, enslaved, who were feeling the same way that Nat Turner felt. When Nat Turner went on his rampage, he paid a price for it. He was hung. So were those who were with him. But oftentimes we have to put ourselves in the shoes of others to try to see if we could fully understand them. And white America has had a historic problem of not being able to put themselves in the shoes of the enslaved. And just look upon the enslaved as just a piece of property, and that attitude is somehow still with us today, even as the Supreme Court ruled in the Dred Scott decision that there's no inherent right that a black man have that a white man is entitled to respect. Thank you. I'll come back.
You want me to put you back on the list, or?
No, I'll come back later.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Glenn, and then the list is open.
Yeah, certainly there's a media bias. We know if a white person is killed, and they might run the story for 6 months talking about, especially if she got blonde hair and blue eyes and looking pretty. Yeah, but if African American is killed, the story don't even come on the national news. So yeah, we know we got that, but and how they report it when the drugs became a problem for white folks. These blue pills that they I can't that's this powerful drug they're taking now. They they wanted sympathy for those people. But when the African American was on drugs, they slammed them in jail. So yeah, we know there's racism. Who can deny that? But they are telling the truth that these little children that shot up Columbine they were victims, of brainwashing, the culture, the culture brainwashing. You got automatic machine videos where you killing people with automatic weapons, making it realistic as you can. You getting accustomed to killing people with automatic weapons. Yeah, the culture forms these young, impressionable minds. Not everybody, but just it don't take but a percent, a small percent, for them to act out with the culture is creating in their minds. That's it.
Thank you. Larry?
Um, a lot of people have a problem with DE, what's what is DEI? Yeah, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and see it as some kind of a, I don't know, discrimination or whatever they may call it. But the intent is to have a multitude of people with different points of views. I mean, if the Supreme Court, as it has been in the past, was just all white Christian Protestant males, look how narrow the interpretation of the law would be. But when you have diverse people on the Supreme Court who could give other points of views on the law, we remember when O.J. Simpson was acquitted. Black people were acting like they were having a party.
Mhm.
White folk understood it, misunderstood it, that they were applauding necessarily for O.J. Simpson, but they weren't. They were applauding because the system, I guess, had finally been turned upside down, and that what they had been crying for years in Los Angeles finally came home to roost. That sometimes the law can be unjust. Personally, well, I won't go into my personal view on that. Anyway, I think he was guilty, but he got away with it. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. And then we have Marion, and the list is open after Marion.
Yeah, it was really popular back at that time, going back to Columbine, to say that the movie The Matrix was an influence on, because they called themselves the Trench Coat Mafia. If you remember the first Matrix movie, Keanu Reeves' character, Neo, wore a trench coat as well. But I think even without that, look how many people have seen that movie, which I loved, and didn't do that same thing. So it's always popular to blame culture, but contrasting what happened in New Orleans to what happened in Las Vegas, you have two soldiers, highly trained, and I'm looking at, because the guy who allegedly blew up that Tesla truck, which is ugly anyway, but that's a different point. Blew up that Tesla truck. He was white, and they haven't found any radicalization or whatever. But I want to see how much PTSD, or talking about veterans experience. And these two are not. I think they were both still active. They're not even retired or whatever. I think they were still active duty. I want to see how much in each person's background that's going to play in, and who gets we have to do better mental health for our service people, because if you're going to just say that for one and not the other, and I do realize it was I don't know, I'm really interested. But when that happened on New Year's Day, um state police were calling him a terrorist. And I thought to myself, because as I repeatedly say, I play racism bingo with the news, I just kept saying, oh, he must not look white, because state police were calling him a terrorist before the FBI officially would. And, kudos to the FBI waiting or hesitating to get more information before they found, just to say, well, this appears to be a terrorist act, then let's investigate it more. State police, it just seems like, looked at the color of his skin. It's like, oh, this man of color drove into a crowd. He's a terrorist.
Thank you, Marion. And then Phyllis, and then the list is open.
I'm trying to unmute. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. There are two things here. I hope I don't ramble. First of all, I have what I consider an astonishing, what am I trying to say? Outlandish medical bill. Because I'm getting treatments for my scoliosis. My spine is crooked, and sometimes I'm zigzagging through the house. Thank God there's tables and chairs I can grab to keep from falling down. But the thought has never occurred to me to go and shoot my doctor who gives me the injections because I wouldn't know who to shoot anyway. We'll find a Humana representative to shoot. I have insurance, but I still have this out of pocket expense of $5,000. But that I'm not going to kill anybody. Secondly, I was looking at the title of our article, Obsession with Humanizing White Male Suspects. And coincidentally, I came across a back and forth conversation on one of these online forums. And there were two men talking back and forth saying how uh, Black people will kill anybody at the drop of a hat. And one of the guys was saying, well, I do believe those people are genetically uh, inherently genetically to program to kill people. And the other guy say, I agree 100%. They do have it's in them to be murderers or killers, and it infuriated me. Then there was I cited I responded. I said the FBI had a 76 white arrest record, and the Black people in this country had 20, whatever, 100%. And then there was 4% of other nationalities that committed murder. It always makes my blood boil when I hear this. My granddaughter tells me, Nana, don't worry about those people. You can't change them. But I'm a human being. I had a Black father. I have two Black sons. And when my oldest son moved away from the state of Louisiana to the state of Arizona, I worried that something would happen. Well, he's 52 years old now, so thank God for that. But the thing is, this nonsense about differentiating between the color of his skin. Black people are more inclined to commit murder than white people. And I just think it's grossly unfair. I'm not going to commit any crimes anytime soon, especially murder. But I'm just saying it just makes me so angry that you're going to take somebody's skin color and say, because you're this darker skinned person, you're more inclined to commit murder than a person with a not so dark color skin. Okay, I'm through filming.
Would you like to get back on the list, Mary?
I'll listen.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, we've got Phyllis, then Amal, then Larry. Phyllis?
Oh, that came faster than I thought. The first person that I heard refer to Jabbar as a terrorist was actually the New Orleans mayor, Mayor Cantrell, at a press conference. And I always think it's important in these unfolding stories to not leap to conclusions. I know a lot of the right-wing people leapt to the conclusion that he was an immigrant because of his name, and are using his, even though it's found to be not true that he was born and raised in Texas, that they're trying still to use the story to raise anti-immigrant hatred. For me, what Luigi's crime points out is not that this country is divided right and left, although yes, we are, but also there's a top versus bottom divide. And we don't have very many people who act out violently against the top. from the bottom. The I guess it makes me think about what's considered a violent crime versus what's considered a non-violent crime. And I think that Brian Thompson was also committing crimes in his role as CEO of a major healthcare company, even though technically he's allowed to do what he does under the system. That doesn't mean it's not a crime to me. And also nobody has called what Luigi did white on white crime. I'd like to mention that. Because it sure was. I did have somebody at work when we were talking about this ask me if Luigi's from here because of his name. And I'm like, if he's not from here, he's from Italy. And what? So the last thing I want to say is about John Q, because I work in heart transplant and I do somewhat appreciate that movie, but I also found a lot of flaws in terms of what happens in heart transplant. And there's no way a father can shoot himself in the head and donate his heart to his much smaller son, because his heart is probably not going to fit inside that leg. That's just one thing. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you. Okay, we've got Amal and then Larry, and the list is open after that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Y'all forgive me. I was laughing at what Phyllis said about the big heart going into that little body. So
Yeah.
it's so true, but it just made me laugh because I love that movie, but I never thought about it like that.
It's so true.
You know, it's the history of white males and the crimes that they commit has just never been seen at the same scale as crimes that other people commit. So it really brings to mind to me what is considered a crime and who defines what that is. Because people in the United States, if you mention Adolf Hitler's name, they oh my God, they despise Adolf Hitler. But you celebrate George Washington, who massacred just as many Native Americans as Hitler did in Nazi Germany. So who's the criminal and who's not?
Another time I see.
You know, Dylan Roof taken to get to Burger King after he massacred 9 people unarmed inside of a church. You know, and it's almost like, oh, you know, let's just take him to McDonald's. He didn't do nothing that bad, you know. It's like he stole some M&Ms out of a store. You know, a little kid that steals some M&Ms out of a store. That's not that bad. Take him to McDonald's and get him something to eat. You know, so I remember I watched this documentary. It's called the Rape of Recy Taylor. It was done. I can't remember what year it was done in, but it's an excellent documentary. And this was a Black woman who was coming from church, some type of church services, whatever it was. And some teenage boys, some teenage white boys in a car grabbed her and they took her off and they raped her. Well, she had enough guts.
You want to get back on the list, Amal? Or you can obviously finish your sentence if you'd like.
No. You can put me back on. I don't want to interrupt nobody else.
Okay. We've got Larry, then Louise, aka Mother Time, and then we'll put Amal after Louise. Larry?
You know, just sort of picking up on something Marion was saying. In the article, it says as early as the 1920s, Duxbury said crimes committed by Black people would often be used to justify narratives of biological inferiority or advance claims of Black people having less developed morals than white people. I mean, can you imagine a people thinking Blacks had less morals than white people? when we were when the system was guilty of the 1830 Indian Removal Act. Think of the thousands of Indians who died being forced off their land. When you think of the system of slavery that was perpetrated by white America, when you think of the lynchings that were perpetrated by white America, so whose morals are we talking about? And I picked up the paper yesterday morning, and 40 in Gaza had been bombed by Israel. I picked up the paper this morning. Another 42 had been bombed in Gaza. Innocent men, women, and children. Whose morals are we talking about? This is almost the epitome of immorality. That what is taking place in the Middle East can be supported by the white dominated government of America. Whose morals are we talking about? Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Louise, and then Amal, and the list is open after Amal.
So I was staying quiet until I was just hearing people's opinions, and I'm glad Phyllis spoke up first because I kind of feel exactly how she feels, but maybe even a bit more, a bit stronger about it as far as insurance. All insurance, in my opinion, is legal crime, to be honest, and especially medical insurance, and especially the medical field. A pill that costs $2 to make really needs it to stay alive. Um, I don't know if you've ever watched. You should, if you haven't. Sick in America by Michael Moore, that documentary. It people lose houses, lose their lives, lose. They insurance anyway. But yes, of course, killing someone not good. But as Phyllis said, who's to say he's not killing people indirectly from his choices and the rules and laws that he makes and passes and let it be. Um, Sometimes when you got to fight fire with fire, and I think it's a hero in a lot of people's minds because everyone is like, yeah, insurance sucks and this is great, and it's brought it out into the open just how corrupt the medical field and insurance is. Um, Sorry, but that is kind of how I feel about it. Um, so there's that. That's it.
You, Amal, and the list is open after Amal. Richard.
So yeah, like I was saying about this particular documentary, called The Rape of Reese Taylor. These white guys, and they were teenagers. Got this woman, I think she was like 24 years old, on the way home from a church service, and they took her off and they raped her. Then they just let her go like nothing happened. But the fact that she had enough guts to print on her perpetrators, usually, which was a bold move to make at that time. This is the 1940s, if I'm not mistaken. And it was either Alabama or Georgia, one of the two. And so, but they took them to trial, and they got and the outcome of the trial was just let them go. Each of them will pay her $100, and that's it. These guys went on to live normal lives because you're white, she's black. It's not that big a deal. And so the crimes that white men have committed, and particularly when that crime was against somebody who wasn't white in the United States, has never been met with the same level of outcome, if you will, that people of color who will commit similar or the same crime, who would be hung from a tree. And I don't mean that literally. I just mean just the outcome of the crime would receive under the same so-called justice system. So That's the history of white male crimes in the United States. They'll never be met with the same scrutiny.
Okay, thank you. Richard. I think you're muted, Richard.
Somebody got a mute who's eating some potato chips or something. They got a mute.
It's not me at all. But I guess I have to immediately respond to Amal's issue again about equal justice, and I have to get back to it. To me, there's a significant difference between the historically correct perception of unequal justice between African Americans and what I'm calling European Americans. It's indisputable, but I think everybody here recognizes that there. Well, I won't speak for everybody, but I think there is a significant quantifiable difference between 1924 and 2024 when it comes to racial justice. And part of this whole issue again gets back to, I don't believe we can have honest discussions about race by referring to white and black. And it's much, much, much more than just a semantic issue. There are so many ways we can talk about that white and black, just using those terms is polarizing. It generalizes. It does everything wrong when it comes to having a productive discussion about race. I brought up partly the issue again that black is capitalized whenever you see it in print. Now it's capitalized, and I have no problem with that. The word white, when it comes to talking about race, is not capitalized. And to me, it really reflects the confusion about how we talk about race. What is white? It's not capitalized. So we're talking about some generic group that when a European American commits a crime, it reflects on the white attitude and the way white justice is meted out. And it's difficult.
Another time, Louise has a clarifying question for
Sure.
Richard.
You don't have to keep calling me Mother Time. I just thought that was quite funny.
I like it.
I don't know if this is a clarifying question, but Richard, what would you use instead then? Does that count as a clarifying question?
No, I'd be willing to address that honestly, and I frankly have a difficult time finding an alternative to white, and I know that's why it's often used. That's why I prefer European American, because I think it's equivalent to what I think African American is a preferred description. But I agree, because Caucasian doesn't cut it, and I know the word white has been around for hundreds of years, but I think again, it just obfuscates issues more than resolves them when it comes to racial discussion. So I agree. I haven't come up yet with a better, beyond European American, I haven't come up with a better word.
All right. I think, Larry, were you on the list? Okay, so we've got Larry, then we have Phyllis and Sharisa.
I think it's sad to say, Richard, but we're dealing with the hand we were dealt. Race, we know, is a social construct, and if somebody committed a robbery and they ran out the front door and the policeman asked the clerk, "Can you describe the robber?" Yes, well, he was a European, about 6 feet tall. Does that automatically imply that he wasn't white? He wasn't black? So black and white is just the reality of what has been forced on America. The human race didn't start out this way. It was the Europeans who created this social construct of race. The Europeans did it, and for the sake of domination and for the sake of instituting white supremacy. So that's what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with European supremacy. We're dealing with white supremacy, those who call themselves white. And so it's, I don't think, considering where we are in history, I don't think we can avoid using those terms, white and black. We might prefer not to, but I think this is the reality that we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Phyllis, and then Teresa.
Well, I feel like white doesn't deserve to be capitalized. That's my take on when I see that in writing. I just feel like, yeah, it doesn't bother me at all. And I would be shocked if I saw somebody capitalize it. To get around on social media, sometimes people have to write YT for white because otherwise the algorithm might tag them as being racist or provocative or political. So you'll see that sometimes. To Luigi, I think given the way they perp walked him into the jail in New York, that I think it's very unlikely that he's not going to. It's very unlikely that he will be found innocent. I think he will be found guilty because of the unhinged reaction, in my opinion, by other CEOs that like they had to have a support group with one of the New York elected leaders. I forget who it was. They want the system to have their back so that this doesn't happen to any more of them. The Blue Cross Blue Shield in I think it was Blue Cross Blue Shield in 3 states was going to only pay for a certain amount of time for anesthesia in surgeries. And then after that, the patient would be required to pay for the anesthesia. They overturned that shortly after Brian Thompson was killed. And yeah, I think this country has a long way to go before there really is equal justice for everyone. And again, we don't have a lot of working class heroes. And I think even though he comes from privilege, I think that's how a lot of people see Luigi. Good.
Thank you, Teresa. And then I guess we can go into wrap-ups unless anybody else wants to comment before wrap-ups.
I would suggest if you don't want to say white, that you would say dominant narrative, because it's not just people who have a lack of melanin in their skin that hold certain belief systems. And I was kind of laughing to myself. I spent 11 years teaching in different countries, and oftentimes I was not initially seen as American because American was synonymous with white. And I would think the same thing of Europeans who are also, have melanated skin. Well, we're going to say, oh, European Americans. Well, that could still be Black. I mean, my favorite joke was that Elon Musk is the richest African American. And that's really not who we think of initially. Well, I won't say we. I don't really think of it, but he literally is from South Africa. He is considered African. He is the richest man in the world. And I think it was probably Chris Rock, I think, was the first comedian I heard say that, the president is now has a co-president, an African American, the highest or the most or the richest. And I just, because that's not how and it's always a thorny when you talk about race. Again, I would not call somebody European American, because I know that to people who are not from the United States when I have been traveling and working in their country. I mean, I thought it was interesting when I worked in South Korea that they thought I was Filipino. They didn't think American. They thought another Asian culture. Or when I lived in Austin, I was Latina apparently. Or when or when I was working in Tanzania, they wanted to know which one of my parents was white because they couldn't. And I literally showed them a picture. These are my parents. You see how they're both brown? So it's just very interesting that I can go to different parts of the world and be considered whatever because race is a social construct. And kudos, Reverend Larry, we got one more thing that we agree on. I do agree with your definition of race. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to agree with you on something. But if I could literally go to different parts of the world and be considered something else, and I'm still a Black American. So I don't think there's ever going to be a satisfactory term, but the one I was suggesting was dominant narrative. So maybe.
Thank you. We've got Amal, and then we can go ahead and do the wrap up.
Yeah, you know, I actually agree with Richard. I think that you know, the idea of black and white, these social constructs, you know, I'm always reluctant about describing human beings like their colors in a crayon box. But once again, these are, like Larry said, this is the hand that black people have been dealt. And so we're only using the narrative that Europeans have put in place. I use black and white, but I'm using it for historical context and for people who just might not understand better, not to literally describe human beings like that. I sometimes might say Negro, but once again, I'm using it in a historical context, not to describe a human being as a Negro. So I agree that European American is a more accurate way to describe these people that we've historically described as white in the United States. And then you have to look at even some Europeans when they got to the United States weren't considered white. The Irish were not considered white when they got to the United States. Italians weren't considered white when they got to the United States. Jews weren't considered white when they got to the United States. You had to be white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. You know who that title related to? The people who was from the British, from England, right? That was the only people who were considered white in the United States. And if you didn't fit that description, you were not considered white, even though you were European. Goes to show you how silly this concept of race can be. So, yeah, one more point. I heard the buzzer, but one more point. And I hear people do this with Elon Musk and it's another actress who's white who was born in South Africa. Her name is Charlize Theron, if I'm mistaken. These people are not African. Be very clear about that. These people are Europeans. They just came to Africa and they never left. So I want to, because I hear that narrative all the time. Oh, Elon Musk is an African American. No, Elon Musk is a European whose people came to Africa and they never left. Just like the Europeans here in the United States did. They're not Native American. They're Europeans who came to these lands and they never left. So we have to be very, very clear about how we use these terms, you know, for people who came in as conquerors and they stayed on the land that they conquered and never left. Elon Musk fits that description. Charlize Theron fits that description. And any European that's in the United States or the European descendant people who are in the United States fit that description, i.e. all of your presidents, with the exception of the other guy.
Thank you, Amal. and do the wrap up. And I think Dee Dee is the only person who didn't speak. So Dee Dee, if you'd like, you have 2 minutes. Oh, and Nancy, I'm so sorry, Nancy. I did have you written down. I just hadn't circled. I need things to like pop out. Okay, Dee Dee, go ahead.
I appreciated what Teresa said initially about this article reinforces something that we all know. Because to be honest, I read the total article. I really didn't read anything that I didn't expect. And there wasn't a whole lot new in that article, but it was a reinforcement of what we already know. And this is a difficult time for this kind of a subject because um we are going into an era where race is going to be in the forefront and white privilege is obviously in the forefront. And so it's a pretty scary time, to be honest. And I'm kind of overwhelmed with anticipation as to what will occur. And so I enjoyed the discussion, and that's really all I have to say.
Nancy, 2 minutes.
Yes, it was a very interesting discussion amongst everyone. I think that, you know what I always think of when you talk about how differently people are portrayed in the news when it comes to any type of incident where there is a mass killing or something like that. And the, the the incident in Boston, remember that with the marathon, um, and they referred to them as kids. They kept saying these kids, and I don't ever remember it at any time when the suspect or the alleged suspect is thought to be Black or African American that they're ever referred to as kids. They can be 13 years old and they're never referred to as kids. And that has always stuck with me. I do agree with Dee Dee that we are going into perilous times where race will definitely be a factor in all things. And it's scary. It's just scary. Thank you for the topic and the discussion.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, 1 minute, and I'll just go in the order I see folks on the screen. Phyllis, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I appreciated this article and the conversation around it. One thing I would like to see a study that breaks down how the perpetrator of because this focuses on shootings, of a shooting is treated in relationship to who are their victims. Because I think in some cases, there's some serious toxic masculinity going on. In these cases, not necessarily Luigi's, but like Jabbar, he was considering killing his family before he decided to do something bigger. So I think there's a lot of re-socializing that needs to be done, especially among veterans. And just men in general. There's a lot of stuff that is very disturbing. 70,000 men in a thread, Telegram thread. discussing how to sexually abuse the women in their lives, including relatives. And that's that we know of, 70,000 that we know of. So again, thank you very much, Marla, and everybody for your contributions and Mother Time.
Thank you, Phyllis. Glenn, you have a minute. Okay.
Yeah, I had to unmute. Yes, very interesting article and bring out some good facts. Uh, and I just like I say, I agree with everybody else say. It's the time we living in, and everything is accentuated on race. Thank you.
Thank you. Reverend Larry.
Yeah, Nancy and Louise, I think, mentioned the word scary. Yes, it is scary. I think it stands to reason that this nation cannot continue to exist based on hatred. And so it's scary because God's judgment is scary. And if we don't find a way to throw some love in there, and even as Marvin Gaye said way back in the day, what's going on? He said only love can conquer hate. And if we don't begin to operate out of a sense of God's love and the love of Jesus, then we don't have a future. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
Marla, thank you for bringing this article to us. Again, I just feel like we're now in the Batman universe. So that's going to be I'm going to continue my open-eyed meditation with chanting, and just pursuing happiness no matter what else, because that's all I can really affect and change. But thank you for allowing us to discuss this.
Thank you. Louise.
Yeah, I don't really have much more to say. It was a good discussion. And just to go to the Mother Time thing, one Mardi Gras when I was hugely pregnant with Dylan, my husband Roy was Father Time and I was Mother Earth. And, my belly, I painted the world on my belly. So that was, the last Mardi Gras before Dylan was born. Sorry, nothing to do with the conversation. Okay.
That was good. Thank you. Richard.
Yes, reflecting on, the beginning of a new year, and I was thinking about all the discussions we've had on Erace on racial issues over the past 30 plus years now. And one thing that has come up again and again that Larry and others have said, and that I think most of us agree on, is that race is a social construct. And therein lies so much of the issues, is that being a social construct, we bring subjectivity to these discussions more than we do objectivity. And getting back to the very introduction that Marla read, that we read every time we start these meetings, she talked, is the mission of Erace, among other things, is to treat all persons, I think the word is, all people with love and respect. If I'm not mistaken, this is a very good change from what we used to say. We used to say to treat all colors with love and respect. I think, and based on, what we just talked about recently and what Amala's said and others, I think that's a positive change. The bumper stickers, I believe, still say all colors with love and respect, but at least in our online discussions, we're talking about all people with love and respect. And it gets back to what Reverend Story has said, is that, love is at the heart of it. And to the extent we can get past the social constructs of race, which is going to be difficult, extremely difficult. Let's give it a try. And I'm thinking of Bill Ives and Dennis and others that we've lost over the years, and how much they've contributed to Erace. And I know many of us miss both of them. And best of luck for all of us in the new year. Thanks.
Thank you. Marion.
Thank you so much, Maura, for bringing this. This was very timely for the year, and I'd like to share something with you all. Every day, sometimes I try to do it in the morning. I try often, but then I get distracted. But I have a devotional reading that I've been getting about 20 years, goes from January to December. And some of you may have heard it. It's called The Upper Room, and it is a daily devotional guide. This isn't going to take long. There's something new about the new year that feels full of hope and possibility. The anticipation of something new gives me the desire to clear out the clutter and create space, both physically and mentally, for what the year will bring. So that's my thought that I'd like to leave you all with. And again, Marla, thank you for this very timely discussion. I appreciate seeing all of you. I look forward to it this morning. And I'm so glad and happy to see familiar faces and wish each and every one of you good things for the coming year.
Thank you, Marion. And then Amal.
Oh yeah, well, great article, and I appreciate everybody's comments. And always come to these meetings with an open mind, trying to learn, trying to expand my horizon and think outside outside the box, if you will. And so I always get that somebody always sparks something to make me think at a deeper level. So I always appreciate that about these meetings. And thinking about something Richard said about all of the years that I've been coming to these meetings. I've been coming since the 1990s. So those people that he mentioned just brought something back for me about the importance of being able to come to a table with people who may agree or may disagree with you, and we could still treat each other with the love and respect that the mission statement talks about. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, great. Thank you all. Well, this was a great discussion. I think a good way to start the new year. I don't have a whole lot to add. I mean, a couple of random thoughts that came up for me. I really thought it was interesting what Nancy said about, I think it was Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong, not hearing in the press calling. Can you clarify? It was something about not saying children, referring to folks as children. Was that you, Nancy?
Yes, yes. I was talking about the Boston bombers, the
That's right.
two brothers, and they kept referring to them as
As
kids.
kids, right,
And they were young men in their early 20s. And they
right,
kept
right.
referring to them as kids, these every reporter would refer to them as these kids. And I
That
was
made
just
me
like,
think of, oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, but that's what you wanted to know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Thank you for clarifying. That made me think of the DC sniper back in like the early, I think it was early 2000s,
Mm-hmm.
and how he and a 17-year-old were, ultimately convicted of those crimes and never heard. I mean, he was only 17, but nobody ever said anything about, was this kid manipulated by, John Malvo or John Allen Mohammed, I think was his name. I don't know, it just brought some interesting questions to mind and thinking about how they were portrayed by the press as well, especially when it was discovered that they were not white. Um, Other things that I thought about just randomly in considering Luigi and how has been treated differently. I don't know if you all heard about how he has been treated in prison, but he's been treated very, very well by fellow prisoners. When he made his first appearance in court, he had a new cut, he had his brows done, and it seems quite clear that his fellow prisoners are sending the message that he will be cared for in prison. I don't know if that's the case, but that's kind of what's coming out, I guess. So if something were to transpire, like a Jeffrey Epstein moment or something like that, that folks would know that it was not his fellow prisoners who did harm. But again, that also gives it another element about better treatment of somebody who is white, who is accused or who commits a violent crime. And then, and my other final thought is, how long do we expect people to live in a world full of pain, like chronic pain, that some other folks on here also alluded to, living with denials and recognizing that healthcare denials are in and of themselves violent, before they respond themselves. And I'm not suggesting that violence is the answer, but when so many things have been tried and have failed, what then do you do? It's kind of like, how long can somebody be oppressed before they respond in a way that is not peaceful? And I do think in this instance that might Matt, be applicable. I have a friend whose daughter has a very specific type of cancer, and she had a bone marrow transplant. She's young, 20, I think she's my daughter's age, 21, and the cancer has now come back even after the bone marrow transplant. And there is a very specific specialized medication, chemo, that she needs. And for 1 week's supply, it is $23,000 that they have so far, so it seems, paid out of pocket because they cannot get insurance to okay this to, literally be life saving for her. Anyway, so I guess a lot of my last couple of weeks and my last several years have been spent thinking about just the legacy of violence in the United States and what that means for all of us. And I don't know. It is terrifying to think what might transpire in the coming years, because I think people have had it. They've had it with the proper channels of trying to solve things in a peaceful way, because they're recognizing that that unfortunately they're not getting results with those methods. So I kind of feel like, say it isn't so, but I see Viva la revolution is what Louise said. Yeah. But anyhow, that's all I've got. We can turn off the recording, but thanks everybody. It was a great discussion. Happy New Year to all.